Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. I'm Will Polston. This is episode number 135, and in this episode I'm joined by Jaz Ampaw-Farr. Jaz is a resilience ninja, international speaker, coach and author. Hailed in the United States as the British Oprah, Jaz has travelled the world advising governments, educators and helping tens of thousands of people with her bespoke leadership development programs, training courses and motivational speeches. As a successful entrepreneur, mum of three and former teacher, she knows a thing or two about galvanising people into taking action. With a passion for resilience, positive disruption and a human-first approach to everything, Jaz's energy is infectious and you can't help but become mesmerised and fall under her captivating spell. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about human first leadership. So Jaz, welcome to the show.
Hello, very excited to be here.
So I love your energy, Jaz, and I was expecting an introductory comment just like that. We had the pleasure of meeting a couple of months ago, and from even before I met you, when we were in our little WhatsApp group, there was this energy oozing from you, and everyone was talking about it, and I know that your energy is going to have an infectious effect on people that are listening to this show. So yeah, really grateful to have you here. Great to catch up, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too. And you know what's interesting about the group is I always think at the last minute, I'm like, I can't be anything other than this. So I'm Marmite. You either like it or you don't. If you don't, let's not work together because you'll be sad. I'll be miserable. So I'm kind of like, it's a choice to be who I am, to be this. So yeah, I'm glad that you like it.
So I think that's a really good place to start, actually, because one of your big things that you talk about is sort of positive disruption, and being able to have a be disruptive, but not in a detrimental way. And one of the things that you've just spoken about there, which is you choosing to be authentically you and showing up as you, because if you're not, then you're miserable and they're miserable.
Yeah.
So let's maybe start with positive disruption then.
Yeah, that all came from the fact that I've always been called the disruptive force. And it was on all my school reports. It was always, disruptive, and I never saw it as being disruptive. I saw it as communicating something different to what everyone else is communicating. So what I wanted to do is like reclaim my story and claim my story. I'm not going to, I used to turn the volume down on who I was and try and blend in. Like I was the only brown person at my uni. So I'm not going to blend in with my hair and my bum. I'm designed to stand out. So, but I was always trying to turn the volume down and trying to blend in and be, what does a leader look like? What does and it just doesn't work. So positive disruption is disrupting the status quo, but in a positive way. It's inviting people into courageous conversations because people are only ever like one sandwich away from joining a revolution. They just need an invitation. So it's about asking questions in order to get people thinking beyond that. Well, that's just the way it is. The worst thing for me is just that whole thing of settling. That's just the way it is. What can you do? Here we are. I'm like, no. If miracles are possible, let's go get some. Let's not sit around going, oh, that's just how it is. And that's the nature of it. So I'm put a positive spin on it because I didn't like the story that was told about me growing up and as a teenager and in my records that I was a disruptive influence. I'm like, well, it doesn't always have to be a bad thing as long as it's done with heart and with helping people win. That's what's behind.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. The intention of how that plays out is hugely important. Isn't it so funny about the things? And we're not going to have a conversation today about the schooling system. I'm sure we've all got opinions on the schooling system, but isn't it so funny about so many things that we get or have been brought up through the education system of how to be that actually don't serve us in later life. Like you take entrepreneurs, for example, when you're at school, you're the naughty person if you've got someone else to do your homework, whereas when you grow up and you run a business, that's exactly what you're getting people to do every day. You get people to do other stuff for you. Yeah, exactly. It's so interesting. And like you say about sort of getting to that point where you decide to stand out. But I also want to drill into the piece that you mentioned there, because you've said that you kind of didn't stand out and now you do, and you shine very brightly in the way that you are. But a lot of people go, yeah, well, that's well and good, but I'm scared. I'm really fearful of being me. How do I even know what is me? Because am I being me? If I do be the loud person, am I trying to be the loud person? Or if I am quiet, am I not being like, how do people get clear on what's being them versus
so good
hiding?
So good. I mean, first of all, we've got to like, who is this Goldilocks type person who is just right that we're all trying to be? That's the first thing. It's like, oh, I can't do that because it will be, they won't like it, or it's not this, or I can't mention this, or I can't be honest about this on LinkedIn. There's all these kind of unwritten rules that we are living to. I call them should stories. It's like, and they're embedded right at the beginning, like you said. And I came up through the education system. That's my background as an educator. So, but the kind of, you should do this, you should do that. And even in our like companies, you can say to your team, what are the unwritten rules in this company? And they'll tell you a whole load of stuff you've never said. But somehow this culture gets accidentally created, and then it becomes our story, and we upgrade our phone more often than we upgrade the story we have. We identities change all the time. You're an entrepreneur, you're a parent, you're a kid, you're a year 9. Your identity changes. That's your choice. But belonging requires agreement. And what we do is we change our identity and update our identity, but we don't update the story that goes with it. So we become a CEO, but we're still going around saying we're crap at maths. We become, an amazing leader and a coach, but we're still saying, oh, I'm too fat and I'll always be fat. And it's like, no, you can't do one without the other, because you're living this half-lived life. So when it comes to who am I, what do I do? For me in particular, I tick a lot of boxes, right? I'm brown, I'm a woman, I was born working class at birth, I grew up in foster care. That I've got so many things. I'm like a poster girl for the Conservative Party, done good. So there are so many things that I know have each got a story behind them. And I can't, I'm a combination of all those things. But there's nature, there's nurture, my experiences, and there's also choice. Nature, nurture, and now. And I'm very focused on the now. So I show up as my full fat self because that's the way I want to be. That's my story. For a long time, I lied about who I was. I covered up my X Factor backstory past. I told people I had a brother called Tarquin because I thought it made me look more acceptable. I mean, who's going to even believe that? But I was trying to be what I wanted to be considered acceptable, not be accepted. I might as well wish to be a swordfish, but to be considered acceptable, to fool people into thinking that I was acceptable. And all my energy and focus went into that. When actually, when I first stood up and I was doing kind of keynotes and talks, but I went to a talk and I thought, I wonder what would happen if I just told the truth. And I changed my keynote and I just told a little bit about my past and my journey. And I trended on Twitter for the second time. It totally resonated with people. I got a TEDx talk, I got a book deal. And the very thing that I was terrified of people knowing about me because they might think, oh my gosh, she's not got it all together, was the very thing that gave people agency. So what I wanted, and even before then, when I was doing stand-up comedy, whether with the kids I've taught, my own kids, the adults I work with, the leaders that I train, everyone, I want to be recognizable as me the whole time. I don't want to have to be a different Jaz at different times. So everything I do is totally me. And then I don't have to worry. Like, I'm not going to get caught in some terrible sex scandal and then go, oh, because I'm just honest with what I'm doing the whole time. And that's for me. That's so I don't have to stress. For some people, it may be, I am going to share my 3 Ps: private, public, and personal life. Now, for me, I wouldn't tell you any more than I'd tell someone who sat next to on a plane, but I would tell someone I sat next to on a plane quite a bit, because that's how I choose to be, my public life. But I've still got personal and I've still got private. So it's a choice of what goes into those buckets. Your public life is what you choose to share. Your personal life is things about you that build relationships with people and build businesses and attract talent, because you can't do that if you're not being human. And then the private stuff is the stuff that, you might not want to tell everyone about your Netflix addiction to Bridgerton. You might not want everyone to, and that's okay, as long as you're not a mad axe murderer, and even they have a private side. I mean, this is just how humans work. What I've done is I've refused to join the kind of I'm not good enough brigade and have a theme tune of people like me don't do things like this and I'm not good enough. That's not my theme tune. It was for years, no more. So it's more about what does it, where do you naturally sit? If you had nothing to prove and nothing to lose, who would you be? And that's who I am.
What a question. If you had nothing to lose and nothing to prove, what would you be, or who would you be? What a powerful question. So just so I'm clear, so you wasn't showing up as your full fat self, but then one day you did the keynote, and was the keynote the moment when you decided, actually, I'm going to share a bit about my past and story and stuff that you started saying? Was that the moment that you that changed for you?
It was a number. That's the moment I can pinpoint as it happening, because I remember thinking, what would happen if I was just 10% braver? just 10%, not a whole load. And then I did something and it had a massive positive impact. But up to that point, it just became, I was living outside my own integrity. I was like, I invented phonics in the UK. I worked with famous people. I changed the education system. I was traveling the world, speaking to governments and changing them. And people would say, oh my gosh, you came and spoke to us 5 years ago and you changed everything. And I was like, nah, it didn't, because I knew I wasn't being honest about why it was important to me. And then my brother took a heroin overdose and died. And he was 2 years younger than me. And there's no difference between the experience that my brother and I had growing up and growing into adulthood, except for I had people who were standing with me and he didn't. And it got to the point where I was just like, I know how you can navigate trauma and win. And I'm not saying anything about it because I don't want to look stupid. And it's not so much the guilt of Paul, because there is this guilt around he's my baby brother and I wasn't there for him, which is, irrational and equally horrific. But it's more the, how do you want to be, Jaz? Do you want to carry on living, letting fear drive your bus? Do you want to carry on letting fear decide your decisions? Or do you want to show up? Do you want to fail at being you or succeed at being this half-pint version? And I think that journey, it was because I felt I was keeping everything in. I'm trying to be acceptable. I'm trying to not think or say or do what other people, I'm trying not to get it wrong all the time, whatever the wrong is. I'm trying to be Goldilocks, even though Goldilocks was she broke and entered. She was a thief, so we shouldn't try and be her. But I was trying to be this medium person, and it's just not who I am. And there's a real freedom in being able to draw people in. My business like 5x'd from the moment that I started being me, and not because I changed what I sold or changed what I did. It's because authenticity is a currency that people crave. The problem is that people don't add vulnerability to authenticity. They want to be authentic, but they don't want to be vulnerable. Well, the vulnerability piece is what makes authenticity so valuable.
Exactly. That was going to be one of my things, is that each year I do a list, and on Facebook each year I do a list of my key lesson from the year. And I started when I was 30. So when I was 30, I wrote, right, what are my 30 key lessons up until this point that I find really powerful, that I kind of wish that I knew at a younger age. And each year I pick one key thing from the year, and I'll send them over to you. You can have a read. But one of them is that vulnerability creates authenticity.
Yes.
And that was one of them. And it's really interesting. So that's powerful then. So that it's the moment you decided to talk and share on that stage about the past, but it sounds that maybe the decision, that was when you did it, but the decision was made as a result, and maybe at the point of the link with your brother.
I was moving away from pain. That's why I started being honest, moving on, because you can do something where you move towards something, like you've got a goal. I'm going to settle this business. I'm going to change this in society. You moved. That's compelling. But what's also compelling is when you're trying to get away with something. It's just away from something. But that's when people make bad decisions, because they're making decisions in, I've just got to make this stop. I've just got to leave this relationship or just finish this company. Or that's when people tend to just abdicate responsibility. And for me, it was very much, I want to stop the stress of not being myself. And I don't know what that's going to look like. And I genuinely, it could all go wrong and still worth it, even if it does. Because what I get out of it is full fat Jaz. And that's the freedom I wanted.
Love that. I absolutely love that. Let's talk about action taking, so you made the decision in that moment, I'm going to do it. Now, I also happen to know that there was another time when you just thought, right, I'm going to take action. And that was, as you do. I remember this years ago, I used to sit there and I used to watch a TV show. Now it's interesting. And I'll share something with you separately, which is really going to bug the listeners to this, but I will tell you it separately because I don't want to talk about it online. To do with a particular TV show. And lots of us have sat there and watched this particular TV show, and we've gone, if that was me, I could do that. I could do that. That would be so, I can't believe they've made that decision. What a school we're at. And that show is The Apprentice.
Yep.
And you also said that, didn't you, Jaz? You were also one of those people. But you did something slightly different to most people.
Well, this is the thing, you see. I sat on the sofa, shoving Haribos in my gob, in my pajamas, shouting at the TV because everyone on The Apprentice was completely useless. and thought, if I was on there, it's really simple. You do this, this, this. So I then applied to go on. I do that every 20 years. I applied to go on a reality TV show every 20 years. And it just so happened that when I was 40, I did The Apprentice. So, and I remember going to the audition and getting on and literally having to ring my husband and go, can you pick the kids up? I'm not going to be there for 8 weeks. Literally, I had no strategy apart from turn up and say, I want to do this. I had a business plan, but it was all about positive disruption and bringing about a change in the industry around sort of learning at work and learning at school. And so, yeah, I applied and got on the show and ended up being one of the contestants on The Apprentice a few years back now. I think it was season 9, the year that Leah won, the kind of Irish lady who was blonde and did some sort of skin chemical peel or something. I don't know what she did. But yeah, so I was a huge success on that show, Will. If a huge success has been fired in the first week, bringing nationwide shame to leaders everywhere, and also, yeah, becoming the laughing stock. I did think about faking my own death, but it's very expensive, so I just had to suck it up. But that was another moment of like sheer failure. When you go on You're Fired with Dara O'Brien, and you meet your favorite comedians and they completely rip you a new, like Catherine Ryan eviscerated me when they rip you a new one. There's something about that. I cannot get away from this. So you just have to kind of own it and take ownership of it. And I was a bit of an expert on failure and reframing after failure because of that. So it was good. And people say, like, would you do it again? It's like, God, no, it's like being in prison. You can't go to the toilet on your own. You can't have a pen. In fact, you can have a pen in prison. So it's worse than being in prison. And then, are you glad you did it? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So on that then, so this is interesting because a lot of people, they've all said, I fear failure. That's a lot of people, they fear failure. And you could argue, and some people might say, well, you failed because you were the first person to be fired off of the show and yada, 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 which is, let's face it, I don't know how many millions of people watch the show, but it's a pretty well-known show. And to have that happen, what was your thought process? So for the person that right now is they're maybe not thinking of going on a TV show, but they are fearing doing something.
Yes, yeah.
What's the lesson that they can take from your experience of being of failing, quote, so publicly in that instance? What's your lesson to them?
There's the first thing I always think when people say, I'm scared of failure, or what if I fail? I'm like, oh, I can help you with that in seconds. I can solve that for you. It's not what if, it's when. Okay, so you're going to fail. So rather than spending your energy trying to avoid and stay away from failure, why don't you invest that energy in putting a plan together of knowing what you're going to do when you don't know what to do? That's the first thing, because we need to future-proof ourselves rather than it's like playing Pac-Man and trying not to get eaten by one of those ghosty things. You're going to get eaten. That's the game. But you come back and you change tactics and you learn and you get quicker and faster. So avoiding failure is a really dodgy strategy because it means that you can't learn. Even when I was teaching, I took a ladder into school with 5-year-olds and I took all the rungs off and I just had the rails. And I said, these rungs are failure rungs. When you make a mistake, we're going to celebrate it and we're going to put a rung on the ladder. And then you're going to spend some time learning. And then when you make another mistake, we're going to take another rung and we're going to put it on the ladder. You can't get to success unless you've failed lots of times, because that's what you stand on. So avoiding failure is it's just a ridiculous strategy. I know we do it automatically, but that's where I want people to kind of be alert and go, hold on, I want to be more intentional about this. So that's the first thing. So because I know I have failed so many times, and I have failed on huge life issues. I failed. But I have bounced back. I've survived 100% of my worst days, and I've bounced back, and I've got the reframing down from years, used to carry a grudge for years, to months, to weeks, to days, to hours, to minutes, and I'm going for seconds. So that pivot, that ability to pivot, is where the central tenet of resilience comes from. So that's why when people are saying I'm fearful, I'm like, okay, so let's just look at the reality of this. If you want everything you want is on the other side of a courageous act or a courageous conversation. So fear will keep you this side of everything you want to achieve. The second thing is fear isn't for you. It's not on your side. It's trying to keep you safe. But being safe means never trying anything, never going anywhere, never asking any questions. Being safe means staying quiet and staying out of the way. And if that is what you want for life, then great, you and fear align. But if it's not what you want, then failing forward, people call it, into something is really important. But this is why I talk about being 10% braver as a strategy. Now, 10% braver for some people is raising their hand in a meeting, standing up to telling the family they don't want to go to Bognor Regis again for the 14th time, saying you don't want to do a Christmas party at the office. 10% braver is whatever it looks like for you to do something a little bit braver than you would have done the day before. And that journey of taking those small incremental steps is what suddenly, like every other journey, brings you to a point where you're able to be intentional instead of accidental about your way of being. Because the worst thing, when I did my TEDx talk, people contacted me who knew me and said, aren't you worried about people knowing stuff about you? And I'm like, no. Aren't you worried about what people will think of you? Child, I don't have time to be, I don't know what I'm going to have for lunch today. I haven't got time to be thinking about what people think of me. But freedom from that is what gives me the ability to be the woman I was created to be, and not the woman the world says I should be, because what if it goes wrong? So I lived in fear for years. I'm an expert at living in fear. I choose not to. And it's that choice thing that chooses those 10% braver things. Like when I do keynotes, I used to do something every time. I don't know if this is going to work. Let's try it. I don't know if I'm going to do something interactive. Maybe it won't work, because you need the kind of edge. If you get too good at something, you don't know what it's like on the other side of you. You only know what it's like to succeed at the thing you're planning. And it's not the life I want. It's not the life of an entrepreneur.
No, and do you know what? It's so interesting. I've just finished reading Jimmy Carr's book. I don't know if you've come across Jimmy Carr's book, but I actually found it surprisingly impressive. And I say surprisingly because sort of I've done quite a lot of reading and sort of done a lot of personal development stuff, and there was so much that he crammed in with his comedian way of sort of making it very much his book, that really did impress me. And that's probably my own judgment of maybe what I had on what I had of him. But it was an impressive guy. But one of the things that he spoke about was that as a comedian, and it's so true, and I get it, he said he's written more jokes that have failed than he has that have been successes. He's had more shows that he's put forward that have been bombed, that have been made into actual shows. And but one of the things that he was saying was that when once you've got a good set and he's delivering that good set, he said once he gets comfortable, he knows there's something wrong with it. He knows I'm not testing my new material. I'm not having those awkward silences. And he goes, that for him is the feedback of, no, you need to challenge yourself. You need to push yourself out of that comfort zone and try and do the things that you might not be doing. It's the whole thing of like, if you want to be outstanding, you need to stand out. And it's just doing that little bit, like you said, 10%, what's 10% braver? I always used to love using the example with salespeople. I used to say to them, could you treble your income in the next year? And they go, no way, there's no chance I could do that. I go, okay, fair enough, but could you be 10% better this month? I mean, I said, could you be 10% better every month? They go, yeah. Well, 10% every month is 313%. It's more than 3 times anyway, and that's just the power of compounding. I mean, how Albert Einstein called it the 8th wonder of the world, which is so key.
Do you find that it's really interesting what you're saying about that? Do you find, because I'm finding that I'm saying to people, if you're not, it's no now, it's not no never. If you're not brave enough now, if you think I just can't, it's no now, not no never, because it might be that later on you've got a time. And if your no is it's impossible, it's going to be harder for you to transition when you realize that you could have made that decision, you could have been braver. So do you find that people are like, I find that people are saying, oh, I'm not brave enough just now, and I'm like, well, just own it, just say I'm not ready, I'm not brave enough right now, because even saying that means that I want to be brave. I don't like not being brave enough. Do you find that?
Well, look, you and I, we could have the conversation all day about the power of language, right? And language is so powerful. And anything you say, I am to, you are. I am are the 2 most powerful words in English language. And so someone said, I am not brave. It's an identity statement. You said it's an identity statement. Your strongest force in the human persona is to stay aligned with one's identity, and that identity is so powerful. Whereas even if someone was to add, like I say it all the time with clients, and they'll say something, and I'll say yet, and they'll go. Word. They'll go, oh, because they know I've just left. They go, I can't do it yet. I had a situation. I'm learning to fly at the moment, and I did my first. My flight instructor landed it on me. We'd just finished doing a thing, and he goes, right. So I think you're ready, and I went, ready for what? Like we finished our hour. He goes, no, you're going to go up solo, and I was like. Okay, here we go.
Let's do it.
So straight in, do you know what? Let's go and do it. However, 2 or 3 lessons later, we went up because the way sort of when you're learning to fly solo, you do something called a circuit. So literally,
Right.
Southend Airport, you go up, you go around, you come back down, you go up, you go around, and you do these circuits. I take about sort of 5 or 10 minutes each. And then, like my third solo lesson, or not solo lesson, third time he was like, and I was like, do you know what? Today I'm really not feeling it. There was something just wasn't right.
Yeah.
Now I've already done it. And I could say, Will, no, but just something didn't feel right. And in that moment, I said, you know what? Today, I'm not going to. Because normally, I was joking, I put it in an email recently. I joked, Jaz, that normally in these sort of situations, you go to yourself, well, what's the worst that's going to happen? What's the worst? I'm going to go and speak on stage and I'm going to talk about a bit of my vulnerabilities. What's the worst that's going to happen? Well, you try and use that question when you're flying a plane
not
solo. Like, it's not quite got the same impact.
I could die.
and take a few other people out with me. So that's but that is it. It's right. No, I'm not ready yet, or I'm not brave now, but I'm willing to expand on it or learn on it or all those things. So powerful.
Yeah. And that's why journaling or looking at what you're doing or making goals or doing your lists and looking back is really important. If I've looked back, I take 6 months and I look back at the last 6 months. I look at what did I want to do? What have I done? Well, I have a to-be list. I don't have a to-do list, but I look back at how did I want to be? Did I achieve that? Did I do the things that made me feel like that? Yes. And then that's a win. And every time you do that, it means that the foundation that I start from the next time I'm going to do a challenge or have to do something I'm afraid of, I've already got a step up on it. So it's by refusing to engage with fear, refusing to dance with fear, you're never going to move anywhere forward than where you are.
Yeah. So that's really powerful. I'm just going to do an exercise quickly because I haven't done this for ages. So you said about not moving, right? So what I do, I haven't done this for a long time with people, is I do an exercise where I get them to think back to 5 years before, right? So I've just Googled 2017 because I was trying to remember what was a big event that happened in 2017 that people would remember. When I used to do this years ago, there was key ones that stood out, and I'm just trying to see if there's anything that came up. Was that when that happened? Most significant world events in 2017. We'll bring this up, but basically the point is you remember back to 2017, and what's crazy is that you go back and then you find out what actually happened in 2017. You're like, oh my god, that I thought that was only like 2 years ago, but it actually wasn't. It was a lot longer than that. And there's nothing you can tell I hadn't planned this. It's just actually come up, but the point is that you remember back to a particular point. Okay, so Donald Trump champions America first. So he went on his first campaign, and that was so. You think of everything that's happened then. So when you think back when he first started really coming on the scene, 5 years, pre-COVID. Who would have known a time before COVID, eh? But so you think back to a particular event. I remember doing this years and years ago, and I was saying, right, 20 whatever year it was, and it was the year that Prince William got married to Kate, and it was like, wow, that was. But you think back to the year, and you get back present, and you go, right, what were your goals then?
Yes.
Right. So what were your goals then? And what's amazing when people do this is that one or two things happens. People reflect back and they go, right, what my goals then? My goals were this, and this. And you go, right, and where are you in life now?
Yeah.
And what's really surprising is a lot of people, they have actually achieved a lot of what their dreams were 5 years ago. They're actually living right now, and it's really powerful. But then, and sometimes it's not, and they're in that same place, and then you go, right, well, actually, I haven't really moved in 5 years. So what if I reflect back on the last 5 years, what are the moments, what should I have done in certain moments for me to have been in the place I wanted to be? Well, I would have been 10% braver. That's where this links in. I would have had that conversation. I would have asked that girl out on the date. I would have said yes to going away with my mates. So I probably would have left that company and applied for that other job, and it's a really powerful exercise to do because it does one or two things. It can actually bring a huge amount of gratitude in for actually realizing you've come a long way, particularly if you're one of those people that's really ambitious and really focused on the next thing. And if not, it can sort of help speed you up and make sure the next 5 years aren't the same.
Definitely. I was skimming through my diary, checking it. 2017 was the year I did my TEDx talk, where I was going, and the thing about that is I was just going to keep it safe and just talk about failure, because I know lots of people see a TEDx. I don't want to be, I don't want to be embarrassed. And at the last minute, I kind of I was speaking to a coach and they were saying, well, what would it look like if it didn't look like this? And I started that's where I started talking about the Apprentice and failure and my brother and my past and what happened. So that totally changed everything, because from that point, everything went mad. I was literally doing, keynotes around leadership, education, just in the UK. And I remember at the end of 2017, getting booked to go to California for my first international gig, and then speaking to doing Google and Gucci and all these big stages, and standing at Leeds First Arena with like 20,000 people. That is mind blowing now. And I'm looking back at that. But I remember in 2017, that was when I was just starting to think, is there any value in me should I be honest or should I not? I was still lying about who I was in 2017. Also, there's a fantastic book by Bronnie Ware called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. And what I love about this is you get to pre-mortem, because this is looking back and going, what if? The pre-mortem is, she worked in palliative care. What are the 5 top regrets? And it's, I wish I'd worked less, but that wasn't number one. I wish I spent more time with family and friends. That wasn't number one. The number one regret of the dying, right across gender, age, race, creed, background, I wish I'd had the courage to be myself. Now, honestly, a bit of sick comes up in the back of my mouth. It's heartbreaking. And I think, right, if people at the end of their life are mostly saying, I wish I'd had the courage to be myself, then let me not let till I get there and then go, do you know what? Let's pre-mortem that and let's do it now. So I am taking the courage that's needed to be myself now, so that when I get to the point where I look back, finally, I can go, do you know what? Booyah, I had the courage to be myself. I'm trying to live like end of life Jazz is going to be like, yes, that's what I'm trying to do. So that 5-year thing is beautiful, looking back and looking at the evidence and data, and then using that as a projection, looking right at the end and going, what do I want people to say at my funeral? In fact, I'm having a funeral before I die, because if people are going to say nice things about me, I'm going to be in the room. So I'm having my own.
You want to know about
myself. I'm not waiting until I'm gone. They all have a party. I'm an extra. I need to be part of it.
you mentioned something a moment ago, which I want to bring up. A to-be list.
Yeah.
What's a to-be list?
Well, like I live and die by to-do lists. Like I have all this stuff that I want to do. I find it quite overwhelming. It's not exciting. It's not sexy. And it's like being a galley slave, just on this treadmill of producing stuff. So what I decided is I want to, we spend a lot of time being human doings and not human beings. It's like we're supposed to be a pendulum. We're supposed to swing to being, and then back to doing, and then back to rest and being, and then back. And we don't. We swing to doing, and we stay there like that, and it just burn ourselves out. I'm like, that's a fool's game. I'm not doing that. So how can I change it? And instead of what do I want to do, it's who do I want to be? And so I write a list of how I want to feel at the end of this podcast, at the end of this meeting, at the end of this dinner with my kids, at the end of this launch. How do I want to feel? Who do I want to be? And then I do things that will take me in that direction. So it's kind of attaching your what to your why. Like I hate washing up, right? I hate washing up. I've got a dishwasher. I get out of it as much as I can, because it feels like a waste of time, a waste of seconds. I could be inventing a cure for something, it frustrates me, and the frustration makes it worse. But what I realize about washing up is it's time for me to be at the sink with my kids, with my husband, at the breakfast bar, connecting, chatting. Now I see a value in it, because that what is allowing me to do this. It's like feeding into my why. So the to be side of things connects what you're doing with why you're doing it. That reconnection piece is something that's really strong. And I'd put a lot of my just mindset down to making those connections between what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. When you get lost in the detail of the day, and actually the bigger detail is I'm doing this, I'm going shopping, but it means that I can create fresh, healthy meals for my kids, sit together, eat, have chats, build relationships, have a great relationship. I mean, who wouldn't want that? But when you just reduce it to dragging your shopping around Tesco's, that's the means to the end. So absolutely. I call it a jazz hack, really. I'm just trying. It's like life hacks. I'm just trying to hack myself, and how can I trick myself, like the penguins falling off the cliff in Happy Feet. I'm trying to trick myself into being the best person I can be. And these little hacks, I've just been really intentional about them.
Well, most people, they live their life doing something to have something to be something. So I'm gonna do loads of work, have loads of money, I'll be happy, for example. Whereas when you flip it around and go, right, who do I want to be? Who am I choosing to be today? It's like you say, how am I going to show up? What's the feelings I want to cultivate? Then you still do the doings and you still have the havings, but you're enjoying the experience the whole way along. And it makes a big difference, doesn't it? Yeah,
definitely. And again, not for everyone. It's not like everybody has to be doing this. It's always a choice. It's always a choice to be. That's what the being essence is. You can choose who of you want to be. You can choose what sort of person you want to be based on what you've got and these decisions you take. It's like I've got a switch on my back, and one says automatic, one says intentional. And I used to live on automatic, just making the same decisions, getting cross at the same things, getting frustrated. And now I switch to intentional. I'm like, right. And that's where a to-be list comes in really handy. It helps me to be intentional.
Love it. Love it. Talking of intention, one of my life's intentions is I have a mission, and my mission in life is to inspire 1 billion people to transform excuses into results and live a life that they love. That for me is the driver. Now, I'm not naive enough to think that I'm going to work with 1 billion people directly. What I do believe is that if people achieve their full potential, and I can have an element of assistance in that in some capacity by getting them to think differently or act differently, which ultimately means they get a different result, then it will help, and then the ripple effect of that is if they achieve their full potential, not only it benefits them, it benefits their family, their friends, their community, society, humanity, the universe. And it's interesting because you said that your TED talk was the first time you spoke about something, and then when I did my TED talk, it was the first time I spoke about something, and I was shitting myself. I was like, do I do this? Don't I do this?
For an hour when I finished. Like,
and if I'm completely honest, I didn't, I wasn't full fat. I was like,
really?
7/8 fat. Yeah, I was 7/8 fat. I could have gone a step further, which I didn't. And knowing what I know now, it'd have been different. But the key here, though, and I know you talk about everyday heroes, is that it's knowing that what we choose to do does have the ability to have that impact on our people. I refer to it as the ripple effect. You talk about everyday heroes, and you've already touched on sort of the situation with your brother as sort of a driver, not the driver, not necessarily the driver. There's no doubt multiple, but a driver that's had an impact on that. And you've also got this huge level of resilience. I mean, you've been referred to as the British Oprah, and for people that have been hearing you over the last, I don't know, half an hour or so, we've been chatting and going, wow, she's got an energy, she's amazing, she's got this. but like most people, like you had a bit of a situation, in terms of how things started. You wasn't always like this, and you've learned that resilience. I believe I'm right in saying.
Definitely. I should be dead. I should be like, lost in a world of sexual exploitation and drugs, probably in prison. And I'm none of those things because of the ripple effect. Like I read a lot of your stuff on LinkedIn, and I often, rarely do I read something and not go, yes, out loud, because there's something about someone else saying, come on, to you that can actually change your trajectory. So massive. And we talk about resilience. So I used to think it was like being a doormat, just stiff upper lip and let people carry on taking the mick out of you. That's not resilience. That's some kind of submission. I don't know what that is. But resilience is shortening the time between being on the floor and getting back up to your full fat self. That's the key to it. It's that being able to take responsibility for what you're responsible for and nothing else. Because that's the problem. How much time do we spend worrying about the flipping weather or who's the prime minister? We've got no control. But the things we do have control of, we just abdicate them. We cross our fingers and hope for the best. So taking responsibility for what I'm responsible for, and I'm not responsible for my grown-up children's moods, much as I want to make everything right for them. Like they have to make their own decisions. I can't influence that. I can influence it, but I can't control it in the way that I'd love to be able to. And also that being able to reframe is a massive part of it. And the last one is being able to reach out beyond what you think is possible. Because we've all got this garden of possibility, and it's as big as our arms can stretch. But what we don't always remember is that everyone's got their gardens, and people are throwing apples over and bushes are growing over. There's more perspective than you can see. So if someone, like I went to a conference and I spoke, and I like to stay around when I speak. I like to go early and stay late and kind of be part of the day. So there was this group on this dance group called Dance Syndrome, and they were 12-year-old Down syndrome girls who decided to start a dance group. It was this really stuffy conference, and they had every single person, all these guys in suits, these CEOs up dancing to YMCA and doing these moves. And I remember sort of, sitting there thinking, so these girls who are children and have all sorts of stigma attached to their condition that they've got no control over, and have various illnesses to navigate and a lifespan that might not be as big as everyone else. They decided to get up and do something. What's your problem, Jaz? Remind me again, what's in your way? And I don't want to have to explain myself to the 12-year-old leader of the group. Do you know what I mean? Oh, but I've had a really hard life. It's been a long, tough winter. I'm going, no, I don't want to have that conversation. So it's more about the reframing of things. And I think that's how resilience is developed, because I didn't set out to be resilient. I had a strong sense of injustice. I knew things were wrong, and I didn't like being on the edge. I didn't like, slipping into depression and feeling that I wasn't good enough and hating myself. I didn't like living like that, but I didn't know that resilience was the way forward. I thought it was like, how do I write my own story? And my own story will not be reliant on these half truths and other people's opinions. It will be reliant on what I write with the pen that's in my hand. And I think that was a big driver right from the beginning. And then I say lucky, I make decisions now around having the right people in my life. So I have, like Russell Brand, I read Russell Brand's book, and he said, I'm an addict, and if I do these 5 things a day, it's like be grateful, do some ironing, I don't know, meditate, I won't slip back into addiction. I'm like, what are my 5 things? Because I think my baseline is misery. It was for 40 years. So what are the things I do that make sure that I don't go into that? And what do I do daily? So I'm really big on kind of habits and routine and doing things like that. And resilience became a part of that. It became a part of that. And also the failure aspect, like looking back and seeing where it should have all been over and it wasn't, and how I came back from that gives you massive, like if you reflect on it, massive foundation to stand on. And a phrase for a long time was, I have faced bigger, hairier, scarier things than this, and survived, thrived, and been driving change afterwards. So what is it that I can do in this situation? And I have t-shirts with message on. It's my stack artist today. It's mistake without the E. I've got fear fighter, resilience ninja, positive disruptor. But one of them is, the 10% braver thing. And what does it look like next if I do that next? And so it kind of comes from this. It's momentum. You build up momentum, and then it becomes a compulsion. I'm compelled to not believe in the crap about myself that kept me down for so long. And yeah, resilience is a key part of that.
So there's so much for people to take away there. If we, because normally I start this podcast, as the regular listeners will know, with, so you do what you do now, but why? But we're gonna flip it around today, and we're ending on it. So you do what you do. You're a leadership coach. You've worked with people all around the world. You work with governments. You work with the likes of major brands, Google, Gucci, just to name a few. You've got this. Your company's called Human First, right?
Yeah.
You've got this human first approach to life, and like, you cut you and you bleed Jaz. Like, you are you. There is no seeing you as you've explained. You are who you are. Why?
Well, good question. And I think I want to say immediately, because of the people I've been surrounded with, but I was, when I was born, my mum didn't know who my dad was. I was kind of abused by my parent. I lived with my grandma for a bit. She married an abusive guy. There were 6 of us all together. We were in and out of foster care, living in a drug den, living in a squat, living in a brothel, living on the streets. I wasn't really in school. And then by the time I was like 7 years old, that's when my stepdad started raping me. And that kind of carried on as a normal thing to happen. And because I was the eldest, though, and every time a baby was born, I had a job, right? I could take care of the baby. So by 7, I had a 5-year-old and a baby. By 8, I had a 6-year-old, a 1-year-old and another baby. And then it just carried on. So my use was looking after these kids, because my parents would just go out all night and go out all day and get drunk and bring all sorts of people back. So my use was that. And I loved that job. I also got, my stepdad used to sell me to other guys and send me off to nick stuff and and I hated doing all that, but it was a way of survival. So by the time 11 years old, I found out how women got pregnant, and I ran. For me, I abandoned, my story at the time was I abandoned my brothers and my sister. And I left these kids to fend for themselves, because they were basically reliant on me. I used to teach them to climb over the cake factory fence to get half-eaten cake out of the bin, because that's what we lived on, broken biscuits, tie the plastic up so the mice don't get in. I mean, and then I left. So there's this huge thing around guilt and around, that's why when people say, yeah, surviving, I'm like, there's a cost to surviving. And my cost was abandonment. But I was 11 myself. So I ran off, I lived on the streets. I ended up living with a pimp who was grooming me and getting me ready. And he took me shopping, and I'm trying these clothes on, and I'm breaking down. And I realized that my teacher, when I was 6 years ago, who just believed in me and encouraged me, she wouldn't wear this sort of outfit that I was asked to try on. And that was, I don't have the words for it, but I just suddenly got a little bit braver. I was like, I'm not wearing it. And I left the shop, went into a police station, handed myself in, went into foster care again, all this sort of stuff going on. So by the time I was a teenager, with like so many foster homes behind me, estranged from my family, going to court to try and get my brothers and sister like out of the home, giving evidence against my own parents who are giving evidence against me. My mum saying, oh, she was always a whore, and when she was sick, she was always trying to sleep with other men. I mean, just to hear, if your own mother says that in court out in front of people, why are you even here? What's the point of you if your own mother can't? So there was, I'm trying to describe this so people can get some sort of an idea of how much I hated myself and I hated everyone else, of how much pain and anger I was harboring, and I was still having to navigate life. So I was living on my own. I dropped out of school. I went back to sixth form. I failed on my A-levels. I got 2 E's and an N. That's 2.5 A-levels. And I don't think it is officially, but I'm just claiming that. And I knew that I went to my tutor and said, well, that's it, isn't it? I can't go to college now. Everything's finished. I was going to go to uni. My life was going to be uni, food, accommodation, a degree. No one, like kids in care, don't go to uni. 3% do, and they don't stay. I was going to change my story, but then I didn't get the grades. And my tutor said, if you were truly committed, you'd ring every university in the country until you had a place. And I remember like hating her for that. Like, that's going to take days. She's like, well, I'm glad you've got a plan. And I did go home and I did start ringing. And I rang Aberdeen University, and they said, oh, what did you get? I said, oh, I got 2 E's. And they said, oh, 2 E's, that's amazing. Because they thought E and A sounded better. And I was like, no. And then when I explained, they said no. So then I thought, well, the only thing stopping me from moving forward and getting this vision of success that my teacher, Mrs. Cook, at the beginning had said, be a teacher. The only thing stopping me is that I haven't got a Scottish accent. So I skipped to B, and I called a university and pretended to be Scottish and said, oh, I got 2 E's, and they let me have an interview. And when I got there, I was like, what am I going to, I can't even pretend to be Scottish for 20 seconds, let alone 4 years on this course. So I told him the truth about, who I was. And he was so bowled over, someone from my position, my estate, and like, how have you even finished school? He knew people who worked on the council estate where I grew up. So he said, if you promise, and this was the line, if you promise to be more authentic, I promise to get you a place at this university. And I didn't know what authentic meant. So I said, yes. And then I looked it up and I got home. I thought, oh God, that was a mistake. But it's all these little invitations to it. And then at university, I'm the only brown person at uni. But I hadn't even thought about race up until then, because I've grown up with my grandma who's white in various foster homes and care homes. Everybody's white apart from me. My whole family, all my brothers and sisters are white. So it's the first time I've really kind of hit hard on racism. I'm like, what the hell? On top of everything else. So there was all this kind of stuff going on. And at university, I spent the first 2 years sleeping rough because I didn't have anywhere to live. And I was too embarrassed to say. So everybody went home at Christmas and I went back to my hometown and just slept rough on the streets. I slept outside the social services office or the Department of Health and Social Security at the time, because that was the only way to, you get £10 the next day and I can use that to buy food, sofa surfing, getting off with guys so I could stay with someone. I mean, I literally surviving by and most days I don't even know why. It would be so much easier if I just gave up. It'd be so much easier if I just said, people like me don't do things like this, just end it. And what's interesting about that is that without people knowing the situation I was in, they still did those like tiny acts of kindness, those tiny acts of connection that made me keep relighting that birthday candle that goes out and relights again. So by the time when I finished my degree, and I actually had a degree, I was like, no one throws their hat in the hair harder than me. No one celebrates harder. This is a freaking miracle. And then I started working and I started teaching, and I noticed that all the leaders are white and male and middle class, and I'm none of those. And I'm like, how am I going to? So there's this constant barrage to mold and pretend and be quiet and suck it up and be ashamed. And it's like, you know what? I'll be ashamed of the stuff that I've done wrong and I will put them right. But I'm not going to be ashamed of stuff that's got nothing to do with me. I'm not going to be ashamed of someone else making a decision. I'm not going to not going to help anyone stay okay when they've done something wrong. So when I talk about resilience, when I talk about coming back, I am talking about being 10 and wanting to die. I'm talking about hurting myself and other people to the extent where I just want to be locked up forever. I am talking about, like, you know, self-harm as a teenager. This isn't not something I've read and thought, oh, that sounds nice. I have lived this. I am living this. But this phenomenal human female, this is what it looks like on the other side of being just a little bit braver than you were the day before, because that is all I've done, but I've done it consistently. And I've read and I've been around and I connect with people who are also doing the same thing. Our starting point is irrelevant. It's the journey that makes the difference. So I don't care who anyone is. And like often when I do a keynote, people say, oh, you know, what happened to me wasn't as bad as you. It's not the disadvantage Olympics, right? If the worst thing that's happened to you is you can't ride on the back of your boyfriend's motorbike because your mum says it's not safe, well, that's your trauma, isn't it? I'm talking about we all have shit in our lives, but actually it's what you do with that. You can sit with it and say, like, some people win the lottery and sit with a big bag of money on the sofa going, oh God, do you remember when we were poor? It was awful, wasn't it? I'm not one of those people. I was, but now I'm like, this is my story. It's the truth according to me. The pen's in my hand. I will write my story. I'm responsible for it. I take ownership for it. And I will not settle for some lie, some story that my brain, trying to keep me safe, says, well, don't try that in case it goes wrong. You know what? Things do go wrong. And then someone like me driving my own bus can actually change the route to make it a more compelling, beautiful, encouraging one than before. And I think that's why I am who I am. But who I am to be, that's unwritten. And why I know that I could, you know, give it all up and go and work in IKEA. That's one dream of mine. I'd love to just work in IKEA. But I also know that if I was in IKEA being me, then I've got a chance of happiness. If I was in IKEA turning the volume down and pretending I've got a brother called Tarquin, it doesn't matter where I am. I'm not going to be happy. So it's really that it's a reclaiming of being who you were designed to be instead of who you've been told you should be by society, by your family, by whoever. It's never too late, you know, to have that happy childhood that everybody wishes they'd had. I will do it now. Just do it appropriately for a 50-year-old woman. Don't, like, you know, pigtails aren't going to work. Put it that way.
Oh, look, Jaz, you truly are an inspiration. You know, you're phenomenal. Your energy, your enthusiasm, your authenticity, your zest for life, and your genuine desire to want to have an impact on other people. You're not an everyday hero. You are a hero every day. And
oh my God, that's so good. Oh, that is so good. That is so good, Will.
And
yeah,
I'm so pleased that our paths crossed a few months ago, and I really look forward to connecting up again with you in the not distant future. I know that this is quite an important last meeting for you, because the next you're now off. This is the last engagement you're now doing for a month. So for those of people that are listening to this, when this comes off, Jaz is now off for you taking a month out. Is that right?
Yeah. I'll be on social media. People can still come and find me. And if you type Jaz and Apprentice into Google, you know, I'm easy to find. But I'm not doing any keynotes. I'm not traveling. I'm just family and writing and reading. Yeah.
What does the future look like then for Jaz? What's the next few years got in store? Is there any particular we spoke about sort of the 5-year thing, and like you said about looking in the future, and I know obviously you being your full fat self, I know that's definitely on the agenda, but in terms of things you're working towards or goals or ambitions, I'd love to know.
I'm gonna have my own Netflix show, so I'm writing for that. The keynote that I do is kind of interactive. I mean, you've seen it, interactive and fun. It's like Hannah Gatsby doing Nanette. When that came out, lots of people said, oh my gosh, that's you. That's what it feels like watching you do a talk. So so doing keynotes, I love working with corporates, because every time I do a keynote in business, I gift some of the income from that to education. So everybody gets to support schools. So I love doing that. But my own Netflix show, that's what's going to happen.
Very nice. Amazing. Well, Jaz, look, thank you so much for your time. I know that the listeners would have absolutely loved this. People now are going to be going, right, I've heard this woman. Some of you are watching this on YouTube and going, right, I've seen this woman, but people go, right, I need to connect with her. How are people finding you? I don't mean literally coming into your address. We don't need the address, but maybe your social media handles. But where are they connecting with you? Where are they finding you? How can people get in contact with you? All that good stuff.
Well, people are very welcome to join Jaz World. I don't have any answers, but I have a bag full of questions. So I'm all over social media, the big four, with just my name, Jaz Ampaw-Farr, Ampaw Farr. I'm sure you'll give that out. It's Jaz Ampaw-Farr on Twitter, on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on Facebook. And also I have a website and the Human First Academy where people can hang out and catch me. So I'm an easy person to find by design, proudly by design. So I'm an easy person to find. And everyone who connects with me online, I do my social media. I have a personal conversation with people because I appreciate people taking the time, not just to say that was inspirational, but to tell me what I've inspired them to do or to be, what they're going to do more of or less of, to be the person they want to be. So anyone who gets in touch, I will get excited about that and be really happy to reply.
Well, I'm going to set people a little challenge. If people have been listening to this, because the thing that really stood out for me on this is your example of like that moment you decided, right, I'm going to be 10% braver, led to your TEDx talk, you doing it the way you did it, which led to so many other different things. The ripple effect of what that did. My whole coaching company started because I decided I'm going to post a quote on social media, having not done anything. I made a decision a year before that I wanted to work in this space, did nothing about it. So I said, when I'm successful, then I'll do it. A company failed. And then I decided, actually, do you know what? I could just start now. I started posting a quote a day on social media. Then I decided I'd do 2 a day on social media. A week after that, I'd set up a website. Week after that, I had a blog. 3 months after that, 10,000 strong social media following, it sort of built out from that. But it was the moment of deciding I'm going to create a quote. Your moment of deciding I'm going to be 10% braver. So my challenge for people is that, look, if you're going to connect with Jaz, tell her what you're going to do that's 10% braver. What's going to be your action that's 10% braver? It's my fault now, Jaz, that you're not going to have any time off in August, and you're going to be spending the rest of August replying to messages on LinkedIn and Instagram.
That's a good August. Yeah, that's a good August. 10% braver. This is what I'm going to do. It's like I'm committing to something because I said I would. I love that.
Amazing. So, Jaz, thank you so much. And what we'll do, we'll also put your website in the show notes. People can head straight to that. Click the show notes. Again, thank you. You've been an amazing guest. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
And for everyone listening, until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.